universe or multiverse, and this is like we only get we're like a small droplet of this bigger ocean of consciousness, or are we truly kind of unique individuals per se in regards to our consciousness? A very difficult question, but I don't know if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
It's a difficult question. It's a complex question, and I think the simple answer is, in a way, both things are true. That on the one hand, we certainly have this individual experience. I mean, I experience what I call my consciousness, my mind. I have my thoughts and experiences, and they are clearly something that I have, you don't have. And so I sense this sort of individual identity. And yet, at the same time, when we're talking about consciousness in this general sense of just being aware, we could say that in itself is something that's universal. It isn't that it's all the same in essence. I mean, you mentioned like a drop. I think that's a very good analogy, the drop in water. You take a drop out of the ocean. It's an individual drop which has its own characteristics, its own shape, and yet its essence is water. And so that every drop you take out of the ocean, the essence is water, but it's an individual shape. It has its own characteristics. In the same way, every individual being has its own mind, its own form of consciousness, and yet it is all composed of that same universal awareness. So in that sense, we are each a manifestation. Our minds are a manifestation of something that is universal in character.
Mm. And what's your take on, let's say, life after death, or that our kind of awareness or consciousness then actually continues and lives beyond the boundaries of our body? What's your take on that?
I really don't know. It's I think an important thing for me is not to get caught up in any belief about what might be or might not be. I just have to say I don't know. There's interesting evidence that suggests that there may be some continuation, and yet I know there's nothing absolutely convincing for me. And different people all have different theories. People who believe in some continuation, there's so many different theories as to what it's like. Who knows which one is the right one? They can't all be right. So I just don't know. It's not something I can answer. It maybe there is, and maybe just when we die, it's like the drop returns to the ocean and just becomes part of the infinite ocean again.
Yes.
I suppose my interest is more how do we live this life rather than what's going to happen after this life. And I think a lot of the wanting to believe in a life after this life is we become attached to our individual identity, and we really don't want to sense I'm going to lose what I call me, all the things I've done, my experiences, my goals. We identify with this individual drop, and we fear death and what's going to happen. And so we sort of, when that goes, and so we cling to this idea that, well, maybe it doesn't go, maybe something continues.
Do you think that, because I kind of interpret that as a form of escape, if you will, then we're not, really kind of focusing on the life we're living right now. We want to look beyond either the boundaries of this life or some kind of escape on this planet, of course, in that sense of entertainment or what have you. But do you think that the trouble we're in, that you talked a little bit about mentioning at the beginning here, the trouble that we're in, that this is a part of that in a way, that we're so wanting to escape into something else instead of just looking at life for what it is?
I think so, yes. I think it's all bound up, and I think so much of it comes from we start looking for escape or fulfillment. We look for things outside ourselves to make us feel okay, to make us feel happy. And it could be escape going into other sorts of experiences or realms, or hoping for something after we die. But also just, in our day-to-day life, we look for the things, the experiences that are going to make us feel okay. So we're looking outside ourselves. And I think what I'm interested in is what all the great spiritual teachers have said in very different ways, but they're all pointing to the same thing, that the fulfillment we're looking for is really right there inside us the whole time, and we miss it because we're looking outside. We're chasing illusions, and we find some temporary satisfaction, and then we realize that was an illusion, and we keep on chasing these illusions rather than saying, hang on, is it possible for me to feel okay right now in the present moment?
Yes.
So it's interesting, rather than pointing towards future lives, I think most of the great spiritual teachers point towards this moment now. How do we wake up? How do we become more conscious, more present
Yes.
in this moment?
And that's one of the hardest thing there is, isn't it? You know, to kind of be present in a way.
It's, again, these things are so full of paradoxes. It's one of the hardest things there is, and
One of
it's
the
the easiest
easiest.
thing there is.
Yes.
I think we make it hard because we try to do it. We think there's somewhere to get to, and yet it's really just about stepping out of all the things that take us into the future or the past. Whenever we start thinking, we tend to be thinking about the future or about the past. It's about just noticing what is happening in the present moment. And again, so many people have found that if you just come back to your awareness of your body, you notice what's happening in my body. What's my breathing feel like? How does it feel to be sitting?
Well, we can carry on here. I mean, we were just talking about, I guess, kind of escape, and also of trying, you know, to be in the moment, really, or being more conscious. One thing that I'd like to mention, and I can you can give me your take on that, if you will, and that's that I feel that animals, in many cases, or even actually a flower or even a tree, to me at least, is very much present or in the moment. What do you think about that, Peter? And that, I don't know if that would kind of contradict the idea of, with the more advanced nervous system comes higher consciousness. I don't know. What do you think, Peter?
Yes, I think you're right. I mean, I prefer just to sort of think of animals because it's easier to imagine what it's like for an animal. I think it's very hard to imagine the consciousness of a plant because it's probably so different and probably so much fainter than ours. But if we take, pets, I mean, we've all, I'm sure, we know dogs and cats or horses, other mammals. They do seem to be much more present in the sense that, if a cat's got nothing to do, most of the time it just curls up and sleeps, or a dog will just sort of lie with its chin on the floor and watch the world. It doesn't start getting bored and saying, I've got nothing to do. And I think they are present much more of the time, not the whole time. I think what takes us out of being present is when there's something that needs our attention. There's some discomfort, we're hungry, we need to do something. And so, an animal will at times be out of the present, and sometimes it may be upset if it's hurt. And you watch it, if you're angry at a dog, it might be upset for 5 minutes, but then it seems to settle down again and forgets it. I think the difference with human beings is because in some ways we are more conscious because we can think and we can imagine the future. We create all these additional things to think about, to worry about, and that takes us out of the present. So this is it's almost like the sad joke about human beings, because we are that much smarter, but we misuse our added intelligence to worry about things. What's going to happen tomorrow? Did I do the right thing yesterday? Or we think about the good things. Oh, that was good, and we relive something we did, or we imagine some fantasy of what's going to happen later in the day. We imagine a great restaurant we're going to. All these things fill up the mind and take us out of being present. I don't think a dog, is sitting there on the floor thinking, well, tomorrow I really hope I'm going to have that food again, or I hope I'm going to go for that walk, or
Right.
What a pity that last week this happened, and it's like, it doesn't sit there thinking. And so thinking has made human beings something different. It's allowed us to do so much more. But the downside is it also traps our consciousness. It keeps us thinking about the past or the future, and so takes us out of the present.
Yeah.
And I don't think this happens to any other creature. This is what makes human beings different, and in a way is what makes us, in a sense, a dangerous species on the planet, because it's broken our connection with nature. We
Yes.
end up living in our minds more than just being in the present moment in our bodies.
Do you simply believe that this is I guess a side effect of the evolutionary process that we are in, or do you think that something has, because there certainly are plenty of kind of ideas why the human being or man has been kind of separated, if you will, from nature and gotten into this particular mindset. Do you have a theory or idea about that?
Yes, I think it's a side effect of the evolutionary process, and it's an inevitable side effect. It's part of I see as part of the awakening process that in our evolution we started becoming conscious of ourselves, conscious that we are aware, that we have a mind, and that has been a step forward. And I think this has been helped a lot by the fact, as I've been mentioning, that we have language, that we can talk to each other, but also that we can talk to ourselves. And a lot of thinking is talking to ourselves about things, planning things,
yeah,
analyzing things, which is a very, very useful thing. If we didn't have that, we would just be like the other great apes. And it's interesting, it's been shown that once you start teaching apes languages, they immediately start becoming more like human beings. It's there. But I think having language has made us different. And so it's almost like the downside of language is that we get caught up in this thinking process where, if I look at my thoughts, probably 90% of what I think is totally unnecessary. Most of it is a repeat. It's not helping me at all, but it's like a habit. So I think it's an inevitable part of becoming more conscious. And I think it's only also a temporary part of becoming more conscious. And this is where I feel the world's wisdom traditions, spiritual traditions, philosophies come in, is that they see we have to move through this and move on into a way where we're not so dominated by our thinking. Really, it's about how do we come back to being present again and not be totally caught up in the thinking. So
Yes.
although it's an inevitable part of the journey of awakening, I think it's something we have to come through and come out on the other side of, so that we can begin to use thinking constructively but not be trapped by it.
So you're saying that basically that we're not complete, right? We're on a journey here. We're still developing, and things are probably going to get hopefully then better, right?
Yes, I think that's a very good way of putting it. We're halfway through this journey of awakening, and so many of these inner teachings talk about ways to quieten the mind. It's almost a universal thing. How do we quieten the mind? Whether it's through meditation or music or dance or prayer, whatever it is, it's ways of allowing the mind to settle down again. Our whole society is like encouraging us to think, to be active mentally, which is good in some ways, but we also need to find ways to allow the mind to become quiet again so that we can just settle in to our own being. And I think that's what we're missing. And that's the next challenge in our evolutionary process, is how do we recapture that essential being? How do we just come back to feeling quiet in the moment, whatever's going on?
Yes. And I would very much agree there in regards to society, that it's very much it's good in that sense, because it obviously all things teaches us things, of course, but it's also very much distractive in that process. Now you mentioned that we are kind of moving into this direction